Hi there. In this video, we'll discuss how you can apply evidence-based study strategies when working with your students. After completing this module, you'll be able to articulate, model, and integrate a variety of effective study strategies into your tutoring sessions. In this module so far, we've learned specific evidence-based study strategies, but how can you incorporate them into your tutoring sessions? Well, you can model these strategies when working with your students. For example, if they have an exam coming up, you can use retrieval practice by quizzing your students and elaboration by asking them follow-up questions in terms of how they would apply a certain concept in a different situation. When you do this, make sure to explain to your students what you're doing, how it works, and what the expected result will be. Transparent teaching methods remind us to always explain to our students what they should do, how to do it, and how will they know when they have succeeded. So in this example, you would probably want to explain this at the beginning of the session when making your session plan with your student. After you and the student set your session goals, then you can talk about how you want to achieve them. If the goal is to get through the material to be covered on the exam, you can tell them that you would recommend using quizzing and follow-up questions. You can tell them that you're recommending these strategies because they're evidence-based study strategies. Quizzing is retrieval practice, and follow-up questions that relate to other content are elaboration. So you can tell them that these strategies have been proven to help people retain information long term and enable people to find and correct their mistakes before they have to perform on the exam. When you explain this to students, they'll have a better understanding of why you're running the session the way you are, and at the same time, you just taught them a new skill that they can use on their own in the future. Make sure to avoid ineffective strategies in your sessions. For example, don't spend time in the session lecturing to your students. Students might feel that they're learning from listening to you, but they will only retain a small amount of information from listening to you compared to the large amount that they would retain long term if you used retrieval practice. So be intentional when making your session plans with your students. Use these evidence-based strategies in your session and explain what, how, and the expected results to your students. At the end of the session, you should spend time talking with the student about their next steps. This is another opportunity for you to talk with them about using evidence-based strategies. For example, if they're writing a paper or doing a project, you might suggest that they use space practice by setting a very small and incremental goals. For example, maybe they'll commit to finishing one small section by the end of the week and then a second section by the next week. Or maybe they'll spend at least 30 minutes per day on it. You would explain that this is space practice and how it works. So you could explain how if they space out all the work, they'll be able to think about it between their work session, which allows them to make connections, get ideas, and feel much more confident and less stressed out about it. They'll spend less time overall on it and have a higher quality product at the end. This is an example about how you really need to explain why and how it works. Otherwise, they might not understand the importance of doing it. Finally, make sure to build upon your students' assets, their existing strategies. If they're struggling, remind them that they've gotten this far for a reason and talk about what's worked well for them in the past. Then talk about how they could leverage some of those strategies and incorporate evidence-based study strategies to meet their current needs. We have several optional readings about the myth of learning styles that you're welcome to delve into if you would like to learn more. Essentially, the idea of learning styles that each person has a learning style, visual, auditory, reading, writing, or kinesthetic that they learn best by employing has been disproven. However, this myth of learning styles is still widely believed. People may certainly have preferences for how they go about certain tasks, but those preferences won't necessarily result in better learning outcomes, and they may vary depending upon the task. So please instead focus on the evidence-based learning strategies that are presented in this module. These do apply to all learners and can be implemented in a variety of ways. You need to understand their essential elements that make each of them work, and then can work with students to implement them in ways that work well for the students. For example, for retrieval practice, you may choose to retrieve the information via writing, drawing, speaking, demonstrating, and etc. This often depends more upon what would make most sense for what you're trying to accomplish, and also may depend upon the student's preferences. The evidence-based study strategies presented in this module are applicable for both neurotypical and neurodivergent students. However, neurodivergent learners may benefit from additional strategies for how to study and learn that complement these evidence-based study strategies. And so we'll be delving into this further in another module within this training.